everyone, I'm Noelle Hernandez, and with me today I have Dr. Allen. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Good to be here.
Dr. Allen is the medical director at AdventHealth DeLand for behavioral health and is here to talk with us today about mental health. So before we get started today, we are seated 6 feet apart and we will be taking off our masks for this video. So doctor, what are some of the things that we can do for ourselves regarding our own mental health and well-being?
The first step that I consider that we need to do is to recognize and that mental health actually and mental illness exists. And part of the approach is to attempt to destigmatize what we consider to be mental health. And the other part is that also we have to look at it at equal footing as having other physical condition. The World Health Organization talks about that there is really no health without mental health. So it's very important for us to view this just as someone who might be experiencing headache or abdominal pain. And I consider that to be the first healthy step that we can make in order for us to be able to have the right balance of seeking mental health.
Perfect, thank you so much. And what would you consider would be some of the warning signs that we would want to consider with our mental health?
Generally speaking, with mental health, and this is something that I always explain to my patients, that when they are starting to experience symptoms, one of the first ones that happen, and this is again, I'm trying to give a broad generalization of a complex, intricate condition, but changes in sleeping patterns. If there are changes in sleeping pattern, that's be it what we call initial insomnia, difficulty falling asleep, waking up in the middle of the night, or getting up too early, the early morning awakening. It's very important to heed to those warnings when you're seeing that. They also, if there are changes in personality, someone becomes a little bit more irritable, short-tempered. If there are changes in eating habits, these are all signs that it sounds very benign when we look at them each one separately, but actually as we start to aggregate it, you realize that it could be an issue. Sometimes what happens is that someone could be experiencing these symptoms and our brain tends to rationalize it. And we always said, oh, I didn't sleep because of that. Oh, I didn't eat that well because of that. And the longer we wait, the more it takes in terms of for treatment. And all of a sudden, because we're not heeding to those warning signs, we have more serious conditions to deal with.
Absolutely. So when we do experience some of those warning signs, when would you say it's important for us to speak up?
Once we start to notice and before if we are experiencing these symptoms and we notice that you're feeling under more stress and things are just not going right, I would really encourage you to do the first step. And that the first step is to try to see if you can do things to help improve your sleeping habit, healthy lifestyle changes, and very basic in terms of what we're eating, exercising, these type of things that we can easily implement. I would recommend that should be our first approach to any treatment of mental health issues. The other part of it is that if we are realizing that there are no changes, symptoms are becoming more pronounced, don't try to rationalize it, then you should seek someone.
And if we are experiencing those warning signs and we're recognizing those, and we've gotten to the point where we want to speak up, what are the different options that are available to us what are the different health options that are available to us?
There are a variety of options that are available, and I know that sometimes we have the portrayal of what we see in the movies as that's mental health treatment, but there are a variety, and I often encourage to have more of a gradual approach. But if you're having a gradual approach to a treatment, then it's very important for the person to heed to those early warning signs. And often what happens is that someone does not listen to their body when they're not eating, they're not sleeping well. They emotionally, they notice that they are lacking with energy and motivation, and they don't listen to any of these things. And later on, we have a full-blown major depressive episode. So it is very important that if someone is experiencing now more of these symptoms, some of the options are counseling. Even within the counseling, there is a whole array of different type of counseling. And I'll just use one for an example. There is a type that is called cognitive behavioral treatment, and that type of counseling, what it does is that you have a start date, an end date, you establish what you want to get accomplished during that treatment, and you work with the therapist in order to get that goal accomplished. Unlike other more traditional type of treatments that you would probably come in weekly or once a month for years to come, this is very directed, and it helps with the intervention of the crisis that you're dealing with, or the crisis that you're trying to avert in your life. Now, if symptoms remain persistent, if there are issues as it relates to sleep, appetite, lack of motivation, energy, just cannot focus that well in work, you realize that your mind sometimes is just wandering, sometimes there is a need for medication. And with medication, it has come a long way in terms of the options as it relates to medications, but it is very important that the proper monitoring to be done as that course of treatment is done. And there are medications. I know often the fear is that, oh, this might cause me to be dependent. It might change who I am. Medications, the right one, does not change the individual personality. It does not cause any type of physical dependence, but it's very important to closely work with your mental health care provider in order to go through these options.
That's great. Thank you so much for that information. So that brings us to our final question today, which I think is perhaps on several people's minds as of today. And that is, what is the survival guide for mental health through this COVID-19 era?
Well, during this time, and I know you've probably heard so many times, we're living in unprecedented times, and let me kind of just set the stage from the mental health standpoint. From the mental health standpoint, we are living in a time that what we're dealing with are some very unique characteristics that really increases our risk of developing mental health condition. And we are seeing it now. We have seen a rate of increase of anxiety disorders, and that has brought another problem, because for some, what they have done is seek unhealthy ways of dealing with that. And what happens is we have also seen a rise, and I will use for an example, the use of alcohol consumption, because the way of treating that anxiety. So it's very important that during this period of time that we are able to seek the right treatment as it relates to the dealing with the current crisis. One of the other issues that we have observed is symptoms of depression, and we have noticed that has been on a rise. And we think that a significant factor is that social isolation, that it is required. And we have to be very careful, even now that things are slowly beginning to change. We are still going to be dealing with an element of isolation. As you can see right now, we had to remove our masks. So there is still that element of distance that we are going to be dealing with. And it's very important that as we are dealing with these issues, that we take care of what I call the guardrails. And the guardrails are making sure that you're sleeping the right amount of time, that your eating habits are very important, that you are eating the healthy way, because even that influences your mood. And then the third one is exercising, and whatever your interest is, and it could be as basic as walking, is very important to do this. And I consider those to be our main survival guide as it relates to that. It's very important also for us to have that social interaction, and given this day of isolation, maybe we need to utilize more of the social media. And I know there are individuals that are using this a lot, video conferencing. We have to look at ways of how we can keep that human connection. So the human connection is going to be different than before. As human beings, we tend to adapt, but we need to be able to keep those things in place. So these are what I consider are more of your survival guide during this time. And keep in mind, it is not something that we are seeing that will change tomorrow, a month from now, or 6 months from now. It probably will be here for several months to come, and we will have to adapt, because as humans, it's very important for us to feel that social interaction. That's how we're built, that's how we're made, and it's very important that we preserve that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again for your time today. We sincerely appreciate it. And thank you everyone for tuning in today. We hope you have a great rest of the day.